Sky This Month with your host, Dave McDonald.
Welcome to the Sky This Month for July 2023. I'm your host, Dave McDonald, and as always, it's an exciting month. We have planets galore to talk about, an amazing collective conjunction of a variety of things happening that I'm going to tell you about. July is the anniversary month of our first landing on the moon with Apollo 11, and that happened in July 20th, and there's some neat things happening in the sky to commemorate July 20th landing of Apollo 11. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But we are having a great apparition of Mercury this month. Mercury and Venus together in the sky after sunset. We'll talk a little bit about how you can find both of them. Venus, you probably have found that easily enough. And then we have the moon joining in. Mars is going to be visible all month, though Mars is pretty far away and the distance is increasing through a telescope. It's a mere 4 seconds of arc and down to a magnitude 1.7 on the magnitude scale. But Saturn is going to be emerging now around midnight, and towards the end of the month it's going to be up around 9:30 or so. So Saturn is coming up in the evening sky, Jupiter in the morning sky, but so many things to talk about for the summer constellations. And the zodiac, we have Scorpius, we've got Capricorn, we have Sagittarius, Libra, and Ophiuchus. And we're going to talk about all those towards the end of the show. But first, this image behind me is about the Apollo missions. This happens to be a photo of Apollo 16, and that's John Young with the salute there. And we're going to talk a little bit about Apollo 11 as this is the anniversary. So if you check out this next picture, what do you think that is? I've already given you a huge hint. What liftoff is that? That is the first Saturn V mission bringing 3 astronauts to the moon, where 2 of them, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, will walk on the moon. So that's really pretty neat. So when did this all happen? The Apollo 11 mission, here's a picture of the patch, and the dates for the mission were July 16 to July 24th, 1969, and then the all-important landing happened on July 20th, 1969, at 2017 UTC, that's Universal Time Coordinated, sometimes referred to as Zulu, sometimes referred to as GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. But for us here in the Eastern Time Zone, Eastern Daylight Time, you would subtract 5 hours, and that would be 3:17 in the afternoon is when they landed on July 20th, 1969. And then subsequently to that, several hours later, is when they emerged. And these are the 3 astronauts. Hopefully you remember them. And on the left is Neil Armstrong, who was the first human to walk on the moon. 1 small step for man, 1 giant leap for mankind. And things went crazy from there. And then the second person to walk on the moon is on the far right, Buzz Aldrin. And he's still alive and doing well. And he was the second person to walk on the moon. And then in the middle, Mike Collins died not all that long ago. He's really one of my favorite astronauts. I thought he had a great sense of humor. And Mike Collins stayed in the command ship orbiting the moon, keeping the home fires burning so that Buzz and Neil would have some place to go and meet on time at the right place, on the right rendezvous, and get back to Earth. And it all worked out so amazingly wonderful. So here's an image of Neil coming down the ladder, and the first steps are about to be made on the moon. And the neat thing about footsteps on the moon, whether you were the first or the last, Gene Cernan was the last, Apollo 17, and those footprints are still there, undisturbed. There's no weather happening on the moon. Here's a photo of the Apollo 11 spacecraft after its return from the moon, and it is on display on the road from place to place. I'm not sure exactly where it is right now, but it's on tour. So Apollo 11, we salute you, and it's been just an amazing ride that we had on the moon. And it's been so long that we have, since we've been to the moon, it's time for us to get back to the moon. And so here to help me talk about that is no stranger to the sky this month. Adam Kresnecki is a senior at Clemson University. Welcome again, Adam.
Great to be back. Always a pleasure.
And it always is a pleasure to have you with us. So I'm going to scoot the laptop over to you, and you can take over. And we're going to talk about the Artemis mission, which is what's on tap. We've had a capsule go around the moon and back, and we're planning on sending people there. So, Adam, take us through a little bit of the Artemis mission.
Absolutely. So, this is a very exciting time for people like myself who didn't get to witness the Apollo missions and the feeling of national pride when all that was happening and the landing on the moon. You know, you think about the moon all the way up in the sky, and sometimes it almost feels like forgotten that there was people that landed on there for people like me that didn't get to experience that. And the fact that that's happening again now is going to, I think, breed a whole new generation of people that are interested in space, and hopefully more people that are interested in raising more awareness for that and having the public be more in tune with those types of things moving forward. On the screen now I have the breakdown of the launch system that is going to be used for the Artemis missions. It is called the SLS, conveniently is the Space Launch System. I know it's a very creative name, but and in classic NASA style, it was actually $6 billion over budget and 6 years behind schedule. On the right, the far right, I have an image of the SLS, which is on the right, compared to the Space Shuttle, which is on the left, and you can see they definitely have a resemblance. One's just quite a bit larger. There was a lot of the same tech that was reused, but not just in a lazy sense. It was reworked, reused in a way that they were able to improve upon an already proven design. A picture of it on the launch pad is over here in the other image. And
Adam, if I could ask you a question, it looks like, in looking at the two images there, that we're used to the solid rocket boosters for the space shuttle, and as we look at the SLS system, it looks like maybe there's an additional section.
Right.
For the solid rocket.
They are very similar. They're just slightly longer, slightly increased thrust for the more demanding mission that this vehicle is going to have to perform under. I threw in that comment about it being over budget and over time. That's something you kind of have to expect when you're working with something that's done through NASA and through the government, not compared to like SpaceX, which has been in the news so much recently. And this is because it's hard to get projects like this approved if you're told the real number and the real time scheme from the beginning. So that's just an interesting tidbit of information there. This is the most powerful rocket ever launched. 32 meganewtons probably doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, but it's 20% more thrust than the Saturn V, which was already extremely impressive.
Very.
Very impressive. This is a chemical, non-reusable rocket, which I know is another, feel like I'm kind of dinging on NASA here compared to SpaceX, but they won't be reusing anything other than the crew capsule, which I am showing on the next slide. And that is the only part that will be returning in this mission. On the right-hand side of the screen, I have a picture of the sort of, I don't know what you call that, the payload part of the space rocket, which is the launch abort system, the crew module, the service module, and the spacecraft adapter, which connects on to the rest of it. The crew module there, second from the top, is where the astronauts are obviously going to be hanging out for the duration of the flight. And that is the only part that is returning, as I mentioned. And it's a similar, sort of schematic to the Apollo missions, where it has a heat shield. In this picture, it's on the bottom there. It'll be entering back into Earth through a ablative heat shield, which will kind of burn away with the heat of the atmosphere during re-entry and hopefully get our team back home safe in the Pacific Ocean. This capsule, the crew module specifically, was contracted and designed through Lockheed Martin. Something interesting I found in my research is that it's actually very similar to a Boeing 787 cockpit. So some of these people that are flying it have experience with that, and they'll be able to be feeling much more at home. It's much larger by volume inside, a lot more space. If you've ever seen pictures of the Apollo 11 mission or any of the other Apollo missions, you'll see that it was pretty cramped in there. And also there was a ton of buttons. Any of the movies, any of the dramatized movies that you'll see, there's tons of buttons and switches to flip and everything. And this one is up to the times. It'll be like driving in a modern car where everything's a touchscreen and no physical buttons. It's going to be 100% digital, which I thought was very interesting.
How many people will be able to be on board?
I believe it's 4 to 6. So there's 4
up to 6.
Up to 6. That's what I believe off the top of my head. I don't have the that precise fact on the screen right now, but I do believe I remember reading that. This was designed to be for missions up to 21 days, which versus Apollo is a huge improvement over the 7 to 9 days that they had. And this was definitely something that had a lot of effect on the design of the crew module, and because of the main thing that you have to fight against while in space is the radiation from the charged particles from the sun, which can obviously do a lot of damage to people in space. So this was actually taken care of. You'd think maybe you'd want to put a lead shield around it. You always hear, you go to the dentist, you put on the lead vest and it protects you from the radiation. And while that's true, it does block X-rays and gamma rays and things. It's not great against charged particles, which is the type of radiation that's being emitted from the sun. And that can,
and lead's pretty heavy.
And lead also is very heavy, right? It's very expensive if you were going to try and launch even just a few inch thick coating of lead around the whole capsule. That would be not the most economical situation and also not even the most effective. So actually what they went with is a lithium aluminum alloy, which is tested and proved to be a very good blocker of these charged particles. And they even have a bunker on board of sorts to protect against a coronal mass ejection, a CME, which would be when the sun lets off a huge amount of charged particles in one big burst. And that could be pretty devastating if they didn't have a way to counteract that on board. I have the names of the crew over on the left side of the screen here. Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen. Jeremy Hansen is actually Canadian. These 4 individuals, none of them were actually alive during the Apollo missions. And like I said, this is something that I am taking pride in with this mission. It's a new generation of people that are interested in space, a new generation of astronauts. It's pretty interesting to see when the whole crew that are going to orbit the moon, none of them were even alive during the previous moon mission. It's been that long. So I think we're well overdue to get back, and I'm very excited to see how this plays out. And I have a picture of the 4 crew members here. That's Reed Wiseman in the front, Victor Glover in the back, Jeremy Hansen on the right, and Christina Koch on the left.
And I can see Jeremy Hansen's Canadian patch.
His Canadian patch. So as far as a mission update, I'm sure you've seen on the news about how Artemis 1 has been completed and was a success. The capsule was unmanned, orbited the moon, returned, and landed in the Pacific Ocean, and was a great, engineering prove-out decision for proof of concept for the whole mission. Artemis 2 will expected to do the same mission, a launch, an orbit, and a return. No landing, but this one will be manned, so that's a big deal. That's the first time anybody has been out of Earth's orbit into the moon since the Apollo missions, which is very interesting. It's going to be quite the milestone when that happens.
That was 1972.
Right.
Was the last Apollo 17 mission that came back.
So further missions will be looking to land on the moon. And something that I thought was interesting for this compared to the Apollo missions, as we've been talking about, is that this mission will actually be aiming for the poles, and they're looking to hit somewhere, looking to touch down somewhere that is the most similar to Earth. And when you think about the moon and you think about Earth, they're not very similar, so it's pretty left up for interpretation what that exactly means. But they are actually aiming for the poles of the moon for a number of reasons. In the photo I have in the bottom right of the screen is actually a picture of the South Pole. And that is because many of those craters actually are never exposed to sunlight because they're on the poles. Think about how the poles on Earth here for a large part of the year have continuous daylight or continuous nighttime depending on where exactly you are. And now imagine if you had a large crater at the surface, the sun is coming in at such a shallow angle that the bottom of that crater would actually never get illuminated. And so inside of these craters, there is actually a lot of water ice that has been brought there by comets or meteors or whatever asteroids impacting that have created the craters. And that's actually something that if we were ever to build a long-term base or use Moon as like a home base for further missions, would have to be tapped into as sort of like a refueling station that we could make rocket fuel from, or we could make just drinking water for astronauts, or oxygen, a number of things that it could be used for.
So it sounds like we want to be close to where some water is, getting ready for the future.
Exactly.
Because water will certainly come in handy for the reasons that you just mentioned.
Right.
So it makes sense to try some landings. Well, I trust to successfully do some landings
right.
Up in that area.
Exactly. And this mission, the sort of mission statement that goes along with this mission is that it's going to be a stepping stone for space travel for future missions. I know the big space race now that everybody has in their mind is Mars, and how are we going to get to Mars and all that. And this could be a way that we sort of could make, potentially, as I mentioned, make a sort of a base to relaunch from the moon with significantly less requirements for escape velocity and speed required to leave the gravity well of the moon as opposed to Earth. You don't have to deal with the atmosphere. There's a lot of upsides to that, but it's sort of planning for the future in a way that people can get practice at that. And it's more along that line, more along research and things, where Apollo was sort of more a demonstration of military and technological supremacy versus the Soviet Union during the space race. And so that's pretty much all I got. The second mission we'll have to stay tuned forward to for May 2024 will be manned, going to be very exciting for me. There's going to be a lot of repairs, upgrades since the first mission, a lot of critical data that was gathered along the way, and hopefully they improve on what was already a successful mission and our astronauts have a safe flight and get to be back in the space race, basically.
Well, that's awesome, Adam. Thank you so much for sharing about that, and it's neat that we have the opportunity to go back without feeling like we're in a competition
right.
with anybody, just to do what we want to do.
Right.
But an important point to make is that the Apollo missions, where we did go to the moon, and it cost a lot of money, and some people feel it was a waste of money, but we don't have time. It's not our intention right here and right now. But go and look up, Google NASA spin-offs, and find all the technology, all the products that we have now because we went to the moon and we had to research and we had to do things and improvise and make new. How about MRIs? Did anybody ever have an MRI? Has an MRI ever helped to diagnose and save somebody's life? We didn't go to the moon, we may not have MRIs. There are certain types of basketball sneakers that, because of new materials that were gained. Cordless drills. Why do we have cordless drills? Because we couldn't have an extension cord long enough to get up to the moon. Some crazy stuff, but some really, really practical things, and a lot of things that are life-saving that wouldn't have been invented if we hadn't gone to the moon. And the nice thing about NASA, and everything that they come across, everything that they invent, has to be given back to the public for no charge. I mean, not the physical things. They're not going to buy you an MRI machine, but they are going to provide you with the plans of, hey, this is how you make one for free. It's very cool stuff.
That really is a great point. The innovation that comes from the interest in space and the need for innovation to make these dreams become a reality. And that's sort of what I was alluding to earlier about how that happened back in the original space race, and now the new generation. And like I mentioned, none of the crew had been alive during the Apollo missions.
Yeah.
And my younger generation, hopefully, will inspire some of us to really work hard and pursue those dreams to see now it can become a reality for all of us, which is very cool.
Well, we're counting on you, Adam. Don't let us down. All right. Well, we're going to transition to take a peek at the night sky. Once again, Adam, thank you so much for being part of our show. Great information about the Artemis mission.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All right, let's take a look at what's up in the sky the month of July. Well, we're going to talk about July 20th. Remember, July 20th was the 54th anniversary, or is the 54th anniversary of Apollo 11 landing on the moon. And on that day, there's some amazing things happening in the night sky just after sunset. We're talking like a half an hour after sunset. So the sky that you're seeing here with all the artwork is going to be a little brighter than it appears here. I want you to be able to see the things that I want to point out to you. So this is looking west, and we're looking west around 8:15. This is July 20th. So the constellations are going to be in the same place, but some of these objects, the planets and particularly the moon, are very precise for July 20th. So hopefully it's clear the 19th, 20th, 21st, and such. So you can see how blazing the moon is shown here, but it's a crescent moon. It's not, it kind of looks like it's a full moon, but it's not. Notice that so many things are here in the constellation of Leo, the lion. You see the backwards question mark, or what sometimes I call the sickle of Leo. That's one way you can find Leo, the lion. And then blazing Venus. You can't miss blazing Venus, a magnitude -4.7. Mercury is in the picture here with Venus, but notice how close to the horizon it is. And it's about ready to go behind this tree, which you may or may not have in your view, but it's so close to the horizon. But the good news is you have the rest of the month, July 20th to July 30th, to be hunting for Mercury. This is the best season for Mercury hunting after sunset. And as we get towards the end of the month, Mercury will be around for almost an hour after sunset, which is pretty doggone good for Mercury. Well, let's go to the next picture, and we'll take the artwork away. And I've put the names up of these items. So again, you see Mercury, and again, the sky is going to be lighter than shown here. I just want you to be able to see these objects clearly. But we're talking a half an hour or so after sunset, the sky is still going to be light. So if you have binoculars, that'll be a big help. But Mercury, Venus, so easy to find. The moon, can't miss it. And again, on the 20th, just to the left of the moon is the planet Mars. Definitely reddish, but dim at a magnitude 1.7, where Mercury, though it's more in the glare of the sun, is around a magnitude -0.1. So very bright, but again, it's in the glare of the sun. And Venus, and then we have the heart of the lion, Regulus, the bright heart star of the lion. So 5 objects right there in what we call a conjunction. It's a collective conjunction. It's a neat collection of celestial objects, and I hope that you get to enjoy them. July 20th. July 19th, 21st are also good, but the moon will be in a slightly different place. All right? Now, we're going to stay with July 20th, but we're going to go later at night when the sky is dark. We're going to go to 10 o'clock, July 20th still, but we're going to be facing south some neat constellations to see as we face south. So right in the middle of your screen pretty much is the star Antares, which is a red magnitude 1 star, and it is huge. If you were to put the center of our sun at the center of Antares, out past the orbit of Mars would be inside of that star Antares. It's that huge. And it's bright, it's red, but it's also very far away. And can you see the scorpion? So over here we have the body, some claws coming out. I'm going to show you those in just a moment. And the telltale part of the scorpion, you can see the fish hook going down and around, making the tail of the scorpion. And then to the left of the scorpion is the constellation of Sagittarius, and you can maybe see the teapot asterism. Let's go to the next and bring up the lines to help you out a little bit. And I think you can more clearly see this teapot, what we call an asterism. An asterism is a familiar shape made up of stars that may be from the same or different constellations. In this case, they're all from Sagittarius. You can see the lid of the teapot. Here's the knob. Over here's the handle, the base, it's on the stove, and of course the spout. And the neat thing is the Milky Way is coming out of the spout of the teapot. So that's Sagittarius. And just above the spout, right in this area where I'm pointing, is approximately where the center of our galaxy is, where our central black hole, which is 3 to 4 million times the mass of our sun, is located. Now let's bring up the next slide, and we're going to show some of the artwork here, but I want to also point out this line going across is the ecliptic. That's the pathway of the sun, and that's what determines what constellations are part of the zodiac. So this is Libra, you can see, and the pathway of the sun goes through Scorpio and over here to Sagittarius. But what about this big guy here? Look at his legs are in the path of the sun. Therefore, he is a member of the zodiac, and that's Ophiuchus, the 13th member of the zodiac. More about him perhaps another time. But just realize that some of you may be Ophiuchans and you don't even know it. So, I'm interested in these two stars right here. Okay, they obviously look like they're part of Libra, the scales you can see. But if we look at the claws of the scorpion, you can see how short and stubby they are. But the next slide is going to put up a bunch of names. And the two that I want to point out to you are these two stars here, which are part of the scales, as you can see, Zubin-e-Shamali and Zubin-el-Ganubi. And what this name means in Arabic is northern claw, and this one means southern claw. Zubin-e-Shamali, northern claw, Zubin-el-Ganubi, southern claw, because at one time, the claws of the scorpion came out to this star here and to this star here. But one story goes that Julius Caesar cut off the claws of the scorpion so he could have his own constellation, the scales of justice. Maybe, maybe not, but one thing's for sure, the claws of the scorpion at one time came out to these stars here. I thought you might find that interesting. And then next is just getting rid of all the artwork and all the names and stuff and seeing if you can find these things. So we are July 20th, around 10 o'clock at night, facing south. Go out and notice we're close to the horizon. See if you can see that fish hook or the tail of the scorpion with red Antares. It's like red like Mars is, and Antares, as a matter of fact, means rival of Mars. See if you can find the teapot, Sagittarius, and locate where our central black hole is above the spout. And then check out those two stars, Zubin-e-Shamali and Zubin-el-Ganubi, because they are the claw stars that now belong to Libra. Well, I hope you found that fascinating and you get out and enjoy the greatest show on earth, and it's in your backyard. It's up in the sky. Keep looking up. I'm Dave McDonald for The Sky This Month.